And for the next talk, I want to introduce Luke Stevens, also known as Hack Luke. He is one of those people that phenomenal hacker, but loves to talk about the mental side of bug bounties. That's a flip, and just really dives into what it takes to be successful beyond just the technical. And I think it's a very important area to cover. And this talk, he's going to cover zero to hero, how to crush bounties in your first 12 months. What are the things you want to know if you're just starting out?
How can I go from where I am now with 0 points, 0 bugs, and no bug bounty experience to a successful bug bounty hunter in 12 months or less? That's what I asked myself when I started doing bug bounties. To answer this, firstly, I needed to define exactly what successful meant in this phrase. So successful is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and its exact meaning is basically totally up to the person who's saying it or hearing it. It's highly subjective. So I decided that being a successful bug bounty hunter to me meant that I would be paid enough to replace a full-time salary. Not necessarily my full-time salary, just a full-time salary that would cover my expenses. And I would do that all while maintaining a healthy balance in my life. So on my quest to achieve this, I learned loads and I made a lot of mistakes, but in the end, I feel that I succeeded. In my first 12 months of bug bounties, I earned a decent average Australian, probably the same in the US and Europe and most countries. I earned a decent salary. So the goal of this talk is to provide guidance on how you can go from total 0 to a successful, in that sense, bug bounty hunter in the shortest time possible while avoiding the mistakes that I made along the way, right? Now, if you've recently started your bug bounty journey or you're thinking about starting, you will get a lot of value from this talk, I hope. And if you've been doing bug bounties for a while now, but you're struggling to push yourself to that next level, I think that you'll also get a lot of value from this talk. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty technical details on how to be a more successful bug bounty hunter, there's something way more important that we need to cover. And that is how to overcome the fear of actually starting, okay? Because that is really the first step to being successful, is starting in the first place. And it's, interestingly, the step that trips the most people up. It's the step that stops people from actually doing it, right? So fear of starting, or we can call it FOS, F-O-S, comes in many forms. You might know it as procrastination. That's a fear of starting. Or distraction. That's a fear of starting. You might know it as a fear of judgment from your friends or family, or you might know it as a feeling of inadequacy when you compare yourself to some other pro bug bounty hackers out there, when you see tweets of them earning, 5 figures in a day. And you might have said to yourself things like, bug bounties are too hard because all the bugs have already been found, or the pro bug bounty hunters on this program are so good, there's no way I'll ever find any bugs. That's all fear of starting as well. You might also just be scared of investing your precious time, and time is precious. You might be scared of investing that into bug bounties because you fear that you won't find any bugs and all of that time that you invested will be wasted. Let me tell you this, first and foremost, from a bug bounty hunter perspective, but also now I work for BugCrowd, so I've seen the other side of the coin as a triager. I've seen a lot of the queues and things. I can say to you without any reservations that it is absolutely 100% feasible for anyone to start doing bug bounties today, no matter what skill level you're at. You can start today, right now, and succeed in earning decent money within a year, right? So all of this fear that is holding you back from starting is all in your head. Now, in the past, if you follow me on maybe TikTok or YouTube or whatever, you'll know that I've made some content about starting in the past, because it's something that I'm really passionate about, right? And the content that I make basically says, forget all of those fears and just do it. Overcome your fears and just do it, right? But I'll admit that sometimes it's not quite that simple. And the reason is that these types of fears are deeply rooted within us. And simply ignoring the fear, it's not that simple, right? It can be extremely difficult. Now, it's important to remember that your brain, your primary decision maker, doesn't care whether you're successful in bug bounties at all. Your brain is just the result of millions of years of evolution, and its predominant purpose is to help you to survive. And the best way that it knows how to do that is to keep you within your comfort zone, to keep you safe. That's why naturally humans enjoy the feeling of safety and comfort. We enjoy waking up in the same bed every morning. We enjoy spending every day with the same people. We work the same job for years. We're on the same projects for months or years, and we keep the same hobbies, right? Unfortunately, this primal survival instinct to keep us safe and in our comfort zone may also hold us back from starting new things or taking risks. And that's because to our brain, doing this feels like a risk to our survival. Doing new things that we're not certain about feels like risk to our brain. So how do we overcome this primal fear? I think that the first step is awareness. Every time that an excuse slips into your head or you find yourself procrastinating or something, so basically you're stopping yourself from starting something that will clearly benefit your life, like learning something new or exercising or whatever it is, recognize the excuse for what it is. It's an excuse, and it's bred out of fear, and it's not necessarily rational fear, right? And then the second step is to recognize that by not starting that thing, whether it's bug bounties or something else, you're only cheating yourself. Nobody else cares whether you start or not. Nobody else cares whether you succeed or not, even most of the time, right? But if you want to go on living how you're living now and not bring that thing into your life, whether it's bug bounties or something else, go ahead. Don't bring it into your life. Keep living how you're living now. Nobody's going to stop you from what you're already doing. But if you want to actually grow, you're going to need to pucker up the courage to start and then dive right in. You need to log out of YouTube and Netflix, turn your phone off, put yourself in a space where you can focus and eliminate all distractions, right? Because otherwise you're going to have every excuse under the sun to procrastinate, like your phone's going to beep or you'll get a message on Slack, or you've got this Netflix series that's really taking all your attention. So turn all of that off and then take a deep breath and then just start. That's enough pep talking. Hopefully by now you are convinced to take action to actually start, right? But what does that even mean? What's the first thing that we need to do? It's all very well to be fired up and ready to start, but what's the actual first thing that you're going to do when you sit down in front of your computer? Now, I would recommend that you first focus on education. Whether you're a total cybersecurity newbie or you're a seasoned pen tester, you will still need to spend some time on bug bounty related education, because even if you're coming from pen testing, bug bounties are really different. Make no mistake, okay? In my opinion, hands down, the best guide to starting bug bounties is the Bug Bounty Hunter Methodology by Jason Haddix. He's just released version 4. There are actually 2 version 4 Bug Bounty Hunter methodologies by Jason Haddix. There's the recon one and the application hacking one. So definitely check out both of them. The recon one you can find on YouTube. The application hacking one was earlier today. It was released before this talk. I haven't seen it yet, but I know that it's absolutely amazing because Jason Haddix did it and everything that guy does is amazing. But check out both of them. They're both going to be amazing primers to how to actually find bugs and how to kind of set up your workflow and everything for bug bounties to be successful. Now, a couple of other really great resources that I would recommend education-wise. The Web Application Hacker's Handbook is basically the Bible of web application testing, but it comes with a caveat, right? Basically, it's a very long, dry book about every single, well, not every, but a lot of different vulnerability types that you can find in web applications. And if you try to pick it up and read it from page 1 to page like 700 or whatever it is, then you're gonna get sick of it and you're not gonna make it all the way through the book because it's quite dry, okay? But the way that I think you should be using the Web Application Hackers Handbook is as a reference. So whenever you kind of hear about a new type of vulnerability, say you hear about SQL injections, you can look it up in the Web Application Hackers Handbook, and it will have like a lot of information there about that particular type of vulnerability and how to discover it. For a more practical education, like really hands-on hacking, I would recommend Pentester Lab. So Pentester Lab, they have a lot of free stuff, like free labs that you can download, and there'll be a bunch of exercises there that you can kind of just like hack on in your own time, which will teach you different types of vulnerabilities like the OWASP top 10, but also really new CVEs, like typically not long after a CVE gets released in some popular framework or something like that. Sniff will have uploaded a lab to Pentester Lab. But yeah, there's free exercises that go through the basic stuff, which are really good. And if you find that helpful, then you can pay for the pro version, which is, for what it is, it's really cheap. For the amount of training and the amount of knowledge you can get from Pentester Lab, it's a very good return on investment. So I'd recommend paying for it. By the way, I'm not getting sponsored by Pentester Lab. I just really like it. And Sniff's a good guy. And the last kind of educational resource I'm going to recommend, there are so many educational resources out there, but I'm trying to keep it down to a few because I don't want to give you too much information. I would rather just give you the few things, and you can focus on all of these because there's not too many here, and hopefully you won't feel overwhelmed. You can just, you know which ones to focus on. So yeah, the last resource would be following hackers on all the platforms, whether that's Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, Twitch, and any other platform that they might be on. So I'm pretty hesitant to list actual hackers to follow because there are so many great ones and I cannot list them all or remember them all, and I'll definitely be leaving a stack of them out. But a few that spring to mind are Jason Haddix, Namsec, Sturk, Franz Rosen, Nafi, Meals, ZLZ, Insider PhD, Albino Wax, Mayonnaise, Codingo, Prodigy SML, Zed Shauno, Farah, Mr. Tux Razor, The Gentleman, Space Risk Coonsec, Obi Sam, Techno Geek, OX Patrick, Live Overflow, Ed Overflow, Rhino Raider, Today's New, Mert,
2 hours later.
Europa, Gensec, Yawask, Doggy G, Fisher, Tom Nom Nom, the list goes on, right? You can see why I didn't want to list them all, but I ended up listing quite a few. Just anyone who is either very successful at bounties or releasing good content about bounties, or both. If you're looking for a really great list of people to follow, you can go to my Twitter profile, which is twitter.com/hackluke, which you can see there. And you can just like go to like who I'm following and just go follow all of those people, because there's a bunch of great people there. Yeah, so if you're following these people, you're literally surrounding yourself with greatness. You're surrounding yourself with the things that you want to achieve. And not only is this good motivation, it's also good in a very practical sense, because every time they share something bug bounty related, you have the opportunity to learn from it. So the next thing that will put you on the right path to bug bounty success is consistency and habits. And that's the next thing that I want to talk about. So just for a quick analogy, because I love a good analogy, let's say that there are two identical twins who are both extremely unfit, right? And they both decide that they're going to get fit. So the first one decides that they're going to do 100 push-ups every day. And the second one decides that they're going to do 10 push-ups a day, 5 days a week. The question is, after 5 years, who is more likely to succeed in getting fit? Now, think about that carefully, right? It's going to divide people, I think. But I would be putting my money on the guy who is doing 10 push-ups a day, 5 days a week. The reason is that I don't think that 100 push-ups per day is a sustainable habit. The second twin chose a much more reasonable 10 push-ups per day and only 5 days a week. And this is a habit that is sustainable over the extreme long term, right? So let's say that the first twin, despite being extremely unfit, managed to do 100 push-ups on Monday. On Tuesday morning, he's going to be waking up with a very sore chest and likely won't do any push-ups on Tuesday. By Wednesday, he might be feeling a bit better and do another 100, but then the next 2 days he decides to take off because his muscles are too sore. And then Saturday, he does another 100, and then Sunday he takes off. So in total, the first twin has done 300 push-ups in the first week. But his fatal flaw is that he didn't build any habits because his push-up schedule was all over the place because his muscles were too sore. And because he didn't build a habit, in the following weeks, he kept forgetting to do push-ups on various days and eventually gave up on the idea altogether. On the other hand, the second twin woke up every morning and did 10 push-ups before doing anything else. Straight out of bed, did 10 push-ups. After a week or two, doing these push-ups became a habit and they became part of his lifestyle. So even though the first twin may have appeared to be the one that would succeed, and while he may have done more push-ups in the short term, the second twin continued with his schedule for 5 years because it became part of his lifestyle. Overall, of course, the second twin did way more push-ups than the first twin in the long term, right? The difference between the two was that the second twin knows the power of small incremental changes that are applied consistently. So bringing this back to bug bounties, okay, because we're getting too far into the push-up thing. I get a lot of people messaging me saying, I'm going to spend 10 hours a day, every day doing bug bounties and learning to hack. But what happens is they don't stick to it. And the whole hustle culture thing is to blame for this, right? People, you know, like people are just being like, hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. And, you know, to a point, it's true, but you need to know the difference between, I think, like hustling, like actually doing work and wearing yourself into the ground, right? Someone who's decided they're going to do bug bounties for 10 hours a day or learn bug bounties for 10 hours a day or something, they crafted these goals when they were feeling extremely motivated. And I get it because this happens to me as well. When I'm really motivated, I set goals that are too high. But when the grind sets in, I realized that I was too ambitious. And then, you know, you can't help but feel like you've failed, right? And it sets off this whole like negative spiral and you end up resenting bug bounties. So just trust me, it's better to set sustainable, realistic habits that can be applied over long stretches of time. And this is where the magic happens. This is where you really start to amass a huge trove of knowledge that you can apply to bounties. So when you're planning out your time or you're planning out your schedule or you're planning out like your learning habits for bug bounties or whatever you're doing, just set a little bit of time to do it every day. Don't set 10 hours per day as a goal. Maybe just set 1 hour or something that you feel that you can comfortably do consistently. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is automation. Now, I think it's fair to say that there are two streams of bug bounty hunters. One stream focuses more heavily on automation and scanning, and the other stream focuses more on deep diving. And if you look at the leaderboards on major bug bounty platforms, you will see both types of hackers there, so you can do well either way. But if you're starting now, I recommend that you first build out your automation, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, even if you are more inclined to be a deep diver, and in other words, like you want to go very deeply into one specific application and find bugs in that, having excellent automation will allow you to more quickly and accurately determine where to focus your efforts. So it's all very well focusing on the main application, but maybe you could deep dive on some other application that your automation kind of found through its reconnaissance, and you'll have a lot more luck doing that. Secondly, a good automation system can earn money for you through bounties passively. Now, as I said at the start of this video, we are defining success as being able to earn a full-time salary without sacrificing our lifestyle. And the perfect way to do this is to generate passive income, right? Now, if all of your bugs are being found by you manually, then you're essentially trading time for money, similar to having a job, right? Which is fine. as long as you enjoy what you're doing, but it does limit your potential for growth. And if you want the income to be reliable and consistent, then you need to keep working and keep grinding every single day to earn those bounties that you're finding manually. But if we develop an automation system that earns us money passively, then we can take a break whenever we want and still be finding bugs. Although it can take a while to create an automation system that generates passive income, once it's set up properly, it will continue to earn you money for as long as you leave it scanning. So that's super exciting. Just to really nail this point home, I've made a spreadsheet, okay? And keep in mind that the numbers on this spreadsheet are kind of a little bit guessy, like they're not necessarily accurate to you, but they're just numbers that I've chosen to demonstrate the point, okay? So on the left-hand column here, you can see that I've got the month, and this is from January 2020. It goes all the way down to December 2039. This is the hours spent, the column B. This is the hours spent on bounties every month. So this is basically an average. Because every month's different length, you have to kind of average it out. So in this case, what I've done is I've done 2 hours after work. So 2 hours, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, okay? And that rounds out to be 43 and a third hours per month, sorry. And then in column C, we can see the amount earned. Now, I've been quite generous here. I've said from day one, from the first month, you're gonna earn $10,000 a month, okay? Been very, very generous for the manual hacking here. And if we go all the way down, if we do that for 20 years, we don't take any breaks, we earn $10,000 a month every single month, or on average, we end up earning $2.4 million in 20 years, okay? So how does that compare to what we might earn doing automation? Well, let's find out. So we take the number of hours that we've spent, and let's just assume that we can spend 10 hours coding something, and that will make us back on average $30 per month. So that's pretty doable, I think. If you think about it like this, you could spend 10 hours coding something, and then at some point in the next 10 months, you're going to get a $300 bounty back from that. I think that's pretty reasonable. So basically what we do, we've got to figure out the formula. So we want to get this number, the hours spent in that week, and divide it by 10. So now we've got units of 10 hours, and we times that by 30 because we're making $30 for every 10 hours, okay? So that means that we end up making $130 per month. Yes, but when we're doing automation, you have to remember that actually it's not just 130 for this month. That 43 hours that we spent coding this automation will serve us every single month for the next 20 years. All right. So we've already put in the work to earn this 130 every single month for the next 20 years. So the following month, we can take the previous month's efforts and money that we've earned, but we spend the same amount of time coding more automation, which is going to earn us the same amount of money. It'll earn us another $130 this month. So this month we earn $260. And then this time for the third month, March 2020, we can take, again, the 260, which is the previous 2 months' work, and then we add on another 130 because this month we spent the same amount of time coding, okay? Now, as you can see, these numbers, when you compare them to the manual hunting, are very bad, okay? We're earning in the hundreds instead of the thousands, okay? So we're earning, even after 3 months, we're earning $390 instead of $10,000. But the real magic happens when you start to pull this down over a long stretch. So in this case, we're doing it over 20 years in total, right? I'm scrolling down, and there we go. So we end up with a total of $3.7 million instead of $2.4 million. Now, it's also important to note that the longer we spend on our automation, the more money that we're going to be making every month, regardless of whether we work that month or not. So let's say after 20 years, we're like, okay, I call it quits. I'm sick of coding automation. I'm sick of doing bug hunting. I'm just going to coast from now on. Well, you're in luck, because even if you stop after 20 years, you're still going to be making $31,200 every single month from your automation that you've spent 20 years building. Okay. But that goes for any point, at absolutely any point. Let's say after a year, so what is it, December 2020, or let's say January 2021. Okay. So you've gone from January 2020, and then it gets to January 2021, and you're like, I'm going to have a break here, and I'm not going to do anything for a few months. Well, during that time, you're still earning $1,560 a month, okay, when you're doing nothing. Whereas if you do nothing for the manual hunting method, you're earning zero, because you'd have to just delete this, right? And that is the power of automation. Now, let me be very clear about those figures once again. They are flawed in many ways. I'll admit, okay? For example, you won't get $30 per month for every 10 hours you spend coding. Sometimes you might make more than that though, and sometimes you might make less. So I tried to kind of average it out. Also, you're unlikely to spend 20 years on bug bounties, okay? A lot of things are going to happen in your life in 20 years. Also, if you're earning $10,000 or $20,000 per month from bounties, you'd probably up the amount of time that you're spending on bounties and down the amount of time you're spending on like maybe your day job or whatever. So, you know, the figures would kind of adjust to spending depending on how many hours you're spending doing bounties as well. And also from the manual hacking side, you're very, very unlikely to be earning $10,000 per month from the first month, okay? But as you gain more experience, it's actually possibly doable on average to earn $10,000 per month. There are a lot of people that are actually doing that now. But the point I'm trying to make basically from a financial standpoint is that passive income is super, super powerful. And automation in bug bounties gives you the ability to bring passive income from bug bounties, which is just amazing. Now, just to hedge your bets and keep you motivated, I would recommend adopting an approach to bug bounties where you do both streams. I'd recommend splitting your time roughly in half and then spending half the time on automation, coding your bug bounty automation, and then the other half on manual hacking. That will make you a very well-rounded hacker who's taking full advantage of the whole bug bounty spectrum. And that is what I actually do myself. I hope that now you're convinced about the power of automation and you understand why I spend a lot of time on it. But the next question that I'm sure is in your head would be, what exactly do I automate? So I wanted to speak about that a bit. So firstly, you need to think about data storage. Before you think about anything else, think about data storage. You need an organized, scalable way to store all of the data that's captured by your automation. Now, I chose to do this in a relational database, but some people find that text files work for them, right? But you have to think about text files. There's no way to do relations or no easy way to do relationships. So I like to be able to relate, for example, a platform to a program to a root domain to a subdomain and all that kind of thing. So it doesn't really matter, honestly, whether you choose like what kind of data storage that you choose, as long as it's organized and scalable and easily searchable. So another thing to consider here is what kind of data do you actually want to store? Do you want to just store subdomains, or do you want to do IP addresses, DNS records, HTTP responses, maybe, or like the HTML titles, maybe just that, or status codes, HTTP response status codes? What about port numbers? Basically, the more data that you capture, the more analysis you can do, but also the more storage that you'll need. So it's worth planning this out before you start. And once you've planned out how to store that data that you capture and you've decided on what kind of data you actually want to keep and what you want to throw out, you need to think about alerting. So how do you want to be notified when your automation discovers something? Personally, I've got my own Slack workspace and I just use the Slack API for alerting, but there are loads of other services that you could use that might actually work better for you. Alternatively, again, you can just store output in a text file and check it regularly. Now, when it comes to alerting, the other thing to think about is what you actually want to be notified about. So when I first set up my automation, I generated a Slack message for every time a subdomain got discovered, but of course, I ended up getting thousands and thousands of Slack messages every day, which leads to notification fatigue, right? And I would just end up ignoring all of the notifications, and I couldn't be bothered scrolling back through them to find anything that was useful. So there are a few ways around this, right, to solve this notification fatigue problem. And the first way is to batch notifications. So for example, maybe once every 24 hours, maybe in the morning, your automation can send you a single message containing a list of all of the new subdomains that have been discovered within that last 24 hours. That way, if on that day you want to do some deep diving, some deeper hacking, you can just do it on those targets which are more likely to be fresh, right? The second way is to heavily curate the notifications, heavily curate what you're actually notified about. So for example, you might want to limit your notifications to actual vulnerabilities that have been discovered and not any recon results. And then the last way is to separate your notifications into different channels. So if you're using Slack, you might send recon results to a recon channel, which is muted probably, and then send your actual vulnerability discoveries to a dedicated vulnerability channel with its own notification settings. So you can get notified of vulnerabilities, and then if you want to check the latest recon results, you can just go to that channel manually. Now, yeah, that's what I do. So now you've sorted out your storage schema, you need to start thinking about gathering your results. So I would recommend starting this process by automating your recon. And there are a few ways to do this. If you're looking to get your recon up and running like fairly quickly, then I'd recommend just writing wrappers around existing tools. For example, you might write a Python wrapper, which simply calls the amass binary and then processes and stores the results, okay? So you could then write a separate Python wrapper for all the other subdomain enumeration tools like Subfinder, Asset Finder, or maybe like calling some API that produces similar results. And you can use the same concepts like this wrapper concept for gathering other data. For example, you might write a wrapper around Tom Nom Nom's HTTP probe in order to determine which of your targets are web servers, right? Or you might write a wrapper around Nmap or MassScan to determine open ports. Now, writing wrappers in this way can be a bit dodgy because you have to process the actual text that's returned from the tool. So if the tool is updated and the output is like different in the update, then you might break your automation. Also, some of the tools that you write wrappers for might not be totally stable, or they might have some kind of weird quirks that you don't notice until you start using them at scale. Also, the tool might not exactly fit your purpose. So perhaps the output is in a format that doesn't really suit your automation, or it's missing some key thing that you really need in the results, something like that. But I still think that writing wrappers in this way is a good way to get up and running quickly, okay? The alternative, of course, is to build out your own tools and script all of your own stuff. Instead of writing a wrapper around Amass or Subfinder or whatever, you can simply code your own subdomain enumeration scripts. Now, this can have a number of advantages. Firstly, you've got full control over the tool. Secondly, the code that you write can fit natively within your framework, your automation framework, instead of calling a system process, right? Which is way more efficient. And depending on the efficiency of your code, this can have significant speed advantages too. Yeah. Also, if your automation breaks, this is a big one. If your automation breaks, you know exactly how to fix it, and you won't be relying on the developer of some third-party tool to make changes in order to fix your automation, right? The disadvantage to writing your own stuff, of course, is that you would need to spend a significant amount of time building out these tools. So it might just not be worth the extra effort for you. So on to the next step. Once you've got your recon automation nailed, the next step is, and this is where a lot of people stop. A lot of people just automate their recon, okay? But stopping here is, in my opinion, silly, okay? So once you've got your recon automation nailed, the next step is to start automating your vulnerability scanning, okay? And the more creative you are in this phase, the more bugs you will discover. Essentially, Black box vulnerability scanning, the way that I think of it, is basically like sending probes to a server and analyzing the response or responses for a specific thing. Now, if that specific thing exists, or maybe you're looking for something that doesn't exist, but whatever you're looking for, you can determine from those responses whether the server is vulnerable. And the best tool that I've seen so far that does this is Nuclei from Project Discovery. I won't go into that in too much depth here, but if you want to learn more about it, you can just Google Nuclei Project Discovery, yeah? And you'll find it. I'd highly recommend checking this tool out, along with the templates that are in the same GitHub account. So there's like a Nuclei templates repository and then just a standard Nuclei repository. But you should keep in mind that if you're only relying on Nuclei templates that are in that repository, then literally you are actually scanning for the same things that everyone else is scanning for who is using Nuclei. So vulnerability scanning really comes into its own when you scan for custom things that you designed yourself, right? And that's where your personal judgment and your creativity as a hacker comes into play. Now, one of the biggest problems that I initially faced when I was kind of building up my automation was being able to scale out to a massive attack surface and still scan everything within a reasonable amount of time. In other words, being able to scan the entire bug bounty space frequently. So for example, let's say that you need to scan 3.5 million hosts, right? Which is a situation that I've been in, right? So if you scan 3.5 million hosts, and let's say you're doing a check for a particular vulnerability and it takes about 5 seconds, okay? Maybe you need to make 2 or 3 HTTP requests. So on average, it will take 5 seconds to come back to you. In this case, if you're just using one scanner and it's single threaded, it will take about 200 days, yeah? Ideally, we don't want it to take that long. We don't even really want it to take 1 day, okay? So what options do we have for speeding that up? Well, firstly, you can add threading, which will dramatically improve your speed. If you're lucky, maybe you can run 20 threads at a time, which might knock the scan time down to about 10 or 15 days, which is much, much better, but it's still not ideal. So firstly, that's just too long to wait, but also it would require a system with more resources. And eventually, if you keep adding threads, you're going to run out of resources and it just gets too crazy. So if you tried to do those tasks in 1 day, even if you had quite a powerful VPS setup or something like that, chances are you're not going to be able to do it, right? So ultimately, to progress further than this, you're going to need to scale out using multiple systems. And there are loads of options for doing something like this. Honestly, I haven't experimented with most of them. I have one that works for me, but I haven't experimented with most of them. So I won't go into this too much, but some things that you can check out are Kubernetes. Message brokers like Redis and RabbitMQ are really good, but also there's one that's really up and coming at the moment, and that is Axiom by a great hacker called Pryok, which is PRY0CC. So if you search Axiom, Pryok, GitHub, something like that, you'll definitely find the tool. And it's really coming into its own. And the stuff that Pryok's doing with that is crazy. So I recommend checking that out. Anyway, once you've got all this sorted, you've got your recon, you've got your vulnerability scanning, you're scaling out with multiple systems, and you're able to scan like a very large amount of hosts in a single day, then you're going to have some great automation set up. And you can use that to generate passive bounty income and also to prioritize which targets that you want to deep dive. Okay, so even if you're a deep diving hacker, I'd recommend setting up your automation so that you're able to prioritize the targets that you're deep diving. Now I wanted to talk about something that I am super passionate about, and that is collaboration and community. So bug bounties are at this incredible point now where there's a really awesome, large, supportive community of people who are willing to share information and collaborate with one another. And I personally collaborated very heavily with Codingo and Prodigy SML or SML 555 when I was starting out. In fact, we developed our automation out together and it was super beneficial for all of us. We all learned a lot of stuff. And I would highly recommend collaboration. It's worked very, very well for me. However, there is a caveat. You need to make sure that your collaboration is mutually beneficial. And I did very well here, luckily. So I think it's super important to agree on the terms of your collaboration before you start. All parties that are involved with the collaboration need to be getting equal benefit from the collaboration, and you need to decide what that looks like from the start. Otherwise, it's just leeching, right? Meaning that it won't be a successful collaboration, and at least one person will feel used. So when you collaborate with someone, make sure that you're very upfront from the start about the terms of the collaboration. What will the split be if you make money? Who's responsible for doing what? How much information are you sharing with each other? These are all important things to consider. Now, I don't want to put a dampener on collaboration because it truly is something that's made me grow as a hacker immensely, but I have been very lucky with the people that I've collaborated with. And I've seen other people in collaborations where it's just fallen apart in a nasty way. So I think it's best to mitigate the risk of that happening. Now, as for community, I'd recommend getting involved with the community as much as humanly possible, right? The advantages of doing this are super obvious and abundant. So join the conversation on Twitter, join the bug bounty Slack workspaces, various Slack workspaces and Discords, share your successes with people, share your failures with people, do write-ups, share tips and research that you're doing. Everything that you share and all of the positivity that you spread to others will come back to you tenfold, I promise. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of obvious, but many of the people who message me on Twitter are missing some fundamental knowledge and it's really holding them back. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Time for another analogy. So suppose your bug bounty knowledge is a big tree, okay? And the larger and the older that tree becomes, the more knowledge you have. And each leaf on that tree is a piece of knowledge, which grows on another piece of knowledge, which is a twig. And each twig grows on another piece of knowledge, which is a branch. And then each branch grows on some core hacking knowledge, right? Which is a trunk. Okay, so you can't have leaves without twigs. You can't have twigs without branches. You can't have branches without a trunk. But then the absolute fundamentals, such as basic networking, how HTTP works, basic bash usage, and how web applications work, so basically how the internet works and stuff like that, would be the roots of the tree. Now, without roots, the tree's going to have a lot of trouble growing leaves, right? Can you see where I'm going with this? From what I've seen, there are too many bug bounty hunters out there that are trying to learn the leaves without knowing the roots. So in order to give yourself the best chance of success, you need to give yourself a grounding in the fundamentals of how the internet actually works before you start learning to hack. Don't try and learn the leaves without learning the roots. So there is another general rule that I like to follow when I'm doing bounties. And I think that this rule, following this rule, has allowed me to find way more bugs than I would have otherwise. And this is the rule. It's a basic one. Hack where there is less competition. There are a few practical ways to do this, okay? Firstly, you can hack on programs as soon as they open. So when a new program opens up, jump on it straight away and be one of the first people to hack on it. This sometimes allows you to find really easy critical bugs if you're quick, okay? Secondly, you can use your automation to detect new targets as they pop up and then focus on them straight away. So it's important to have good automation for this one. Using this method will ensure that you are the first, or if not, one of the first hackers to be looking at it, which is a huge advantage, okay? And think about this. What's the likelihood that someone else has got automation which managed to discover this host before you did, and then they've actually decided to act on that and jump on and start hacking on it straight away? Basically zero. So there's a good chance that you'll be the first person if you use that method. And thirdly, you can detect changes in your existing targets using your automation. So for example, if a DNS record changes on a subdomain, check that out because it might be pointing to a new website, it might be a subdomain takeover, or it might just like have some like new admin panel that's not supposed to be exposed externally, something like that. And if an application has a significant change, for example, if the HTTP response size is significantly different to the last time you saw it, or the HTML title's changed or something like that, check it out. Fourthly, you can run a web crawler such as Burp or Hackcrawler against an application regularly with the same settings every time, and then you'll be able to know if a new endpoint suddenly appears. And if a new endpoint appears, you got to check that out, right? Because you'll definitely be the first person checking that out. There's basically no one doing that as far as I know. Of course, there are loads of other ways that you can find targets with less competition, but hopefully that gives you some ideas to start. Remember, creativity is key. If you can think of more ways, implement those into your automation and start doing it. And we are almost out of time, but I saved the best thing for last, okay? So if you just take one thing from this whole talk, I hope that it's this. In order to be successful in bug bounties, you need to be super switched on and creative, which requires that you have a brain that is well nourished and awake. And this means that it's going to be way, way easier for you to succeed at bug bounties if you're eating good food and exercising regularly and sleeping enough, just generally looking after yourself. And I really want to encourage everyone to put their health before anything else. And the best thing is, this won't just make it easier to succeed at bounties, it will just help you in general to live a more fulfilling life. But staying inspired and excited about life and like being able to focus and discipline your time like with bug bounties, it requires more than just being healthy, okay? Healthy is a baseline. You don't want to just be healthy, you want to be at your peak, and this requires constant personal growth. Now, I attribute a lot of my success, not just bounties, but everything, to the time and effort that I invest in improving myself by reading inspiring books, meditating, listening to podcasts, and just generally being creative and inspired in disciplines outside of computers, right? Personal growth is something that all humans, I think, naturally desire, but it's also something that many of us never fully embrace or bring into our lives. And since I have fully like embraced personal growth, I feel like my life is just booming since then, right? So I want to encourage everyone to embrace self-growth and bring that into their lives. I want to encourage all of you to be the best people that you can possibly be. And on that note, best of luck being the best human that you can be, and also good luck with all of your bug bounty endeavors. I know you're going to do great. And if you ever want to contact me or you want to hear more from me, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, and I will be there. Now, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking at LevelUp 7. I'm totally honored to be speaking alongside a bunch of other amazing people that I really look up to. So good luck, everyone. I wish you all the best, and thanks for watching my talk.
That was awesome. Yeah, love the talk. There's just so many questions now that we have to work out where to start. So I guess off the top, one of the key things to kind of cover here: burnout. How do you deal with it? If you're going to be doing this daily, as shown is the better way to kind of approach this, how are you balancing that with burnout?
Yeah, so this question gets asked so much, and to everyone. I think like if you watch like NarmSec stream and things like that, NarmSec asks it to everyone that comes on the stream. For me, it's not about recovering from burnout. Some people ask the question like this. They say, how do I get over burnout? And then other people say, how do I avoid burnout? So I think like 90% of the struggle is avoiding it in the first place. And you can do that by not hacking too much. Like, it's something that you love, and it's easy to do a lot at the start, but you need to make sure that you're approaching hacking and bug bounties from a point where like you don't necessarily need that. You don't need to do that to like survive or whatever. So something that has happened to me in the past is I've had people message me and say, hey, you know, I don't have a job and my family is relying on me being successful in bug bounties or earning bounties this month to like to pay for my family's living expenses or whatever. And I'm like, what? Like you can't put yourself in that position unless you're 100% sure that you're already going to be able to do that on your ear. So like that's one thing, is like trying to like position your life in a way where you are not relying on that income, or you're not absolutely forced to be doing that 100% of the time. So there's that. But you know, if you are feeling burnt out, or you kind of you know, you have overdone it, which I definitely have in the past multiple times, you need to just step back. I find that, you know, some people say I play video games when I feel burnt out. That doesn't work for me, because I'm still sitting in front of a screen. Like physically, I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm sitting in front of a screen. But things that work for me are just getting out of the house, just like not thinking about hacking for a while, just resetting my brain to a point where I'm not constantly thinking about bug bounties or some like bug bounty puzzle that I'm solving or whatever. But like getting outside, getting in nature, going to the beach, going for a bushwalk, you know, spending time with my family, obviously, playing music, things like that. So that's basically how I deal with burnout. But the other thing is the one that I touched on in the talk, and that is like, it's better to pace yourself and to do little and often than it is to do big chunks. So if you commit to doing 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, you are going to probably end up doing more hours over a long stretch than someone who commits to doing 10 hours a day every day, right? Because if you're doing 10 hours a day every day, how long can you realistically keep that up? Versus if you're doing 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, you've got 2 days off, and you're only spending 1 hour a day the other 5 days. So that's like quite an achievable, sustainable thing that you can keep up for a long time. And I'm about to start reading a book. I haven't started reading it yet, but I think that's what it's about, and it's called Atomic Habits. So I'll definitely let you know how that goes after I've read it.
So I guess follow up from that. So one thing that I love, like we've known each other for a few years, and one thing that we've often done is liken bounties to other communities. So I used to play poker for a living, so I'll refer the evolution to that. And you used to be a musician, so you'll refer it to that. And I think we can both agree that both of those communities have established you don't go doing this for a living until. So for poker, if you didn't have a year's worth of savings, you were crazy to try and become a professional poker player. You just wouldn't do it. And music as well. Like you need established gigs, and you don't just jump in and do it. So in the bounty space, what would you say is the definition that we don't have yet, but how would you know when you're ready to go from being sort of your side hustle to a full-time bounty person?
Yeah. Well, actually, Michael, I remember having this conversation with you when we were thinking about it ourselves, because there was a point before we worked for BugCrowd where we were getting pretty successful in the bounty, and we're collaborating a lot on that. And also with Sajib, shout out to SML555. He's not here right now, but shout out to him because we'll probably see it later. But, you know, I remember for me at the time, I was like, I want to earn, I won't say the amount, but I want to earn this much money as my yearly salary. And if I can earn an amount every month for 6 months running, that would make up that salary consistently over that whole 6 months, then I'll quit my job. And that was my goal. And you know what? We did achieve that goal, but by then we were both working for BugCrowd. So now we're like,
we noticed you were doing that and started offering you jobs.
And I think that's a testament to like, there's multiple ways in security to be successul. You know, there's, you know, we love what we do, and it feels like fun. I mean, we enjoy it, and you don't have to be full-time bounties for that.
I think it's a super important, like there was two bits, you know, when you busted out the spreadsheet in that talk, Luke, it's like, what's he doing? But it's really key, I think, to, you know, do the fundamentals in terms of just understanding like what is your personal burn rate? What does a budget look like for your household? You know, like actually approaching the whole thing rationally. There's a lot of excitement. There's like that game mechanic. There's the dopamine hit of getting a bug and like how good that feels, like all of that sort of stuff. And like those are all good things, but if they cause you to act irrationally, you can end up in a position where you're under a fair bit of duress, which is not something that you want to avoid that if you can.
And I will say, like, personal finances are super important. And this is something that, like, my wife is meticulous in our budgeting. Like, she adds up everything. We know exactly what we've got to spend in these different areas. We're saving for our car insurance. As soon as we pay it, we're saving for the whole year, month on month, like little things like that. So when we take risks, we know the risk that we're taking. And when we spend money on something, we know exactly what we're spending and we know that we can or can't afford it. So I'm not saying that we make good decisions, but at least when we make bad decisions, we know exactly how bad the decision is. And I think that's important. And if you're thinking about quitting your job and doing bug bounties full time, like, you better know what you're doing. You know what I mean? You want to be very sure that you can live off that salary. And I don't want to discourage it, because a lot of people have done it very successfully. But you got to know what you're doing, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, that's the next phase of discussion in bounty. Like, I've watched you successfully predict a lot of the bounty space. A couple of years ago, Luke was like, "Oh, YouTube's the next wave," and then he's like, "Oh, it'll be streaming," and we're just hitting that phase. And then automation, we were all in quite alignment. Like, that's the next phase. And I think we're just hitting that phase now where we're starting the mental side of things, being that active discussion, and it's still not quite here yet. A lot of people are taking risks that I think are probably too far on that. Just jump and hope for the best, or as Case would put it, yeet, just go. It's good. These talks are great, because that starts to establish that conversation that needs to be reinforced and happening.
Well, I think, I'll just add to that before we go into another question as well. Just going off the last talk, like, when I stepped out of working full-time into full-time entrepreneurship, it wasn't just cut the whole thing off and jump in. Like, I'd built up the ability to do consulting work to basically backfill my income as I started to work on the riskier stuff. So it looks from the outside in as this, like, crazy, heroic, not very rational decision to jump into trying to do startups. But there's a lot of planning and a lot of thought that went into it. And I think that's part of why it's been successful. Because the same thing applies to most people that do that type of thing, including going into full-time bounty hunting. It's not just like, screw it, let's just go and see what happens. It's actually building it up and actually being in a position where, you're not going to completely, like, you want to be uncomfortable enough for it to push you along, but you don't want to be so uncomfortable that you're so stressed that you just end up burning out. Like, I think it's that kind of balancing act that you want to be able to do the math on.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So you've also released quite a number of tools recently, for example, Hack Crawler, and there's quite a number that you've released. What sort of process would you use to maybe automate something like that, and how is the community actually assisted with the development of those tools? The community part of that, I think, is probably one of the more important things that we probably need to touch on as well.
Yeah, so I feel like the InfoSec community sometimes has a reputation for being a bit harsh, but it's really weird. It's like sometimes harsh, and it's sometimes the most loving, supportive, amazing community ever. So it just depends on who you run into, I think. And, when it comes to releasing tools, I compare it a lot to releasing music. From when I was a musician, you feel like you're really putting yourself out there, and you feel like you are really putting yourself out there for judgment, right? So you release a tool, and then you're just scared that, like, you're going to get a bunch of negative feedback from that and destroy your reputation because you're like, you coded something wrong or whatever. But it's all fair, that's just fair. And I think overcoming that and releasing tools is super important, and it helps the whole community to grow. So I've kind of gotten into the habit of, I realized that I'd written a lot of stuff for myself that wasn't necessarily what I considered to be release quality. And like, from working as a developer previously and working in, application security at banks and stuff, like, I had this kind of, this idea of something being production ready and release quality as being like absolute perfection. And when we're talking about hacking tools, like, it's just not the case. Like, you don't have a development team, you don't have a QA team, you don't have like a full-on DevOps lifecycle unless you're crazy, just for your hacking tools. So I think it's important to just, like, when you feel like you're kind of ready, you have tools at like an okay level, it's okay to release stuff and call it a beta and ask for community support, because you're open sourcing your tools and you are giving to the community. And just own it. And if someone's like, oh, this tool sucks, then ignore them, and just know that you're doing it for the community, and know that it's not just your responsibility. Like, you're giving away something for free. So if you're asking for people's pull requests and tool updates and things like that, people to help you doing that, that's fine. Like absolutely do that. And releasing stuff on GitHub is amazing. I really enjoy doing it. And I have got some public repositories up there that are so not production ready. And even Hackcrawler, when I released Hackcrawler, it didn't really work very well. And it's slowly getting more and more stable. And I feel like it's kind of stable now. It's definitely more stable. But there are still some features in there that I want to implement that still aren't there. And I'm kind of hoping someone else will do it, because I'm short on time. But, that's fine. And a lot of people are using Hackcrawler now, and it's great, So
it's the same mentality as your talk, right? Where you're saying just start. It's just release. Yeah. And I'm terrible at this. I don't take my own advice, but the main mistake people do is over polish and worry too much about what the community thinks before putting it out there. And once you release and you start collaborating,
I think that's what.
I just said that causes you to never release, because you're waiting for that perfect.
Fast DNS plug.
And this is where collaboration is so powerful as well, because you can end up in a position where it's like, okay, I'm releasing this thing. Look, it's alpha. That's being generous, but here's some friends that I've been working with it on, on it with. And all of a sudden you're getting, like, you're not misrepresenting it super polished. You got other people that understand what you're trying to achieve and know how to, like, support you in driving that whole thing forward. So all of a sudden you're not kind of just sticking your neck out on your own. I think that's a really important component to it.
And I mean, that's where, sorry.
Like, when you look at a lot of the major, like, really kind of popular hacking tools that have come out recently, they're actually groups that are releasing them, and Project Discovery is one of those groups. They took Subfinder, which was already an existing tool that actually Kaninga was part of, and they kind of revamped it and re-released it. And it was the same with a lot of the tools that they're doing, but it's a group. So if you're working as a group, I suppose you have less fear about your own reputation and things like that. It's more of a collaborative effort. Yeah.
And I think to click on there too, I mean, you don't have to be a security professional to get involved. Like, Subfinder, originally it was Iceman and myself, and then Kent Gruber joined the project and just brought this professionalism to it from his development background that really took it to that next height. And I think that's often the case, that you can put it out there with, your intention behind it, and someone will see a better way of approaching it. And if you can work together, it becomes a really powerful thing.
Yeah, definitely. Same thing happened with Hackcrawler when I released it. There are like 3 or 4 pull requests that basically, like, revamped the whole tool, put more features in, changed the code up. And, people message me sometimes and they're like, thanks for Hackcrawler. And I say, don't just thank me. There's like 10 contributors, that have gone into that. So it's, agreed.
Yeah.
Someone asked, is Akamai subdomain takeover possible? I don't think it is, but I could be wrong. Subdomain takeovers are one of those things where, like, even that repository that's up, that's like, what's it called? Can I take over XYZ?
Can I take over? Yeah. I'll touch base on, like, I'm one of the main contributors with Ed Overflow. It's reached a stage where, like, I can't contribute anymore because I work in a triage team, so it's the wrong thing for me to do. And Ed Overflow has broader visions for the project that means that one doesn't move as much. So I think there's an important lesson there, that if you just use that as your reference point, you're missing so much. And one of the most valuable things that Luke, Sajib, and I did about a year ago is we flew Sajib up, we got into Luke's apartment, and we just mapped out every single service we could, and then started testing in a spreadsheet. And that kind of research is what leads you to new findings and new areas, because if you're doing that and 90% of people are using the can I take over list, 90% of people are missing things that you're going to find, or some of them are flat out wrong these days because the state has changed.
Yeah.
So
actually, there's a tip in that. There's a hot hashtag bug bounty tip in that. So what we actually did was we got all of our recon data together, and then we got the C names of every domain, every subdomain, and then we checked all of those C names to find which ones were attached to services, and then we got a stack of subdomain takeovers on really, really obscure services that like we didn't know existed. So instead of starting from like, okay, what services exist, we actually had that data, and then we tried to take over them from there. So yeah,
and to kind of touch it, like some of these were spun into entire programming projects. You don't just stop at, oh, I just know this, move to the next one. Some of them we were like, I think there's something there. And there's a project that Luke and Sajib did off the back of that for a service that just took them way down a rabbit hole to finding something that just paid incredible dividends because no one was looking at it the right way. And there's so much of that in the bounty space that you see, like even in our own Discord, some people going, oh, I just don't feel like there's anything to be found. I mean, we still see stuff popping up in public programs because the state changes or the knowledge changes. What we know today, we may not know tomorrow. I mean, there was a point where people didn't understand SQL injection, right? There's a point where people didn't understand XSS. And there's going to be new stuff that comes out, maybe not whole new vulnerabilities, but new ways of thinking that allows you to find things that people haven't seen before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Luke. How do you avoid forgetting to turn off your VPSs and running up your DigitalOcean bill to the point that it annuls any earning that you've made from anything ever?
So there's two things there. The first thing is my automation never sleeps, so I never have any reason to turn a VPS off. That's a ROI.
So earn more is your solution to that problem. Nice. Okay.
You should be paying for your VPSs and then some, and if it's not, then turn it off. But there's that, and also check out Axiom, the project by Prioc, where you can start up DigitalOcean VPSs on a timer, so they just kill themselves after however long you set. So yeah, there's that.
Nice.
And also you can just spin them up, and then at the end of the month when you get the bill, you can remember then and then turn it off.
Or you can get a whopping big cloud services bill because you forgot to turn stuff off. Been there.
DigitalOcean's not so bad, but sometimes with AWS stuff, I just like, even when I get the bill, I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And then I have to like search through the console for an hour trying to find what I left on, you know?
I think Doctyl's really good for DigitalOcean as well. Which I guess bug bounty tip, if you can figure out if a server's been Akami banned and have an image in DigitalOcean, you could spin up a new instance in Doctyl and get a new IP address. So there's some useful things around that I think a lot of people aren't doing, and their automation gets hampered because they're not seeing those pieces. And a lot of that's still to be explored.
Yeah, you could automate around this to like kind of like what you touched on, like AWS and DigitalOcean both have really comprehensive APIs. Yeah. So if you did want to remember to turn something off, you could literally code something up to send you a message every day saying, these are the instances that you've currently got running.
Yeah. You know? Are you sure? Yeah.
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 That'd be cool.
You know, I mean, I keep on referring to DigitalOcean here, but it's the same for any cloud provider.
Totally.
DO's the one that I use most often. But yeah, that whole idea of management of all these resources, especially, I've seen it. I guess the reason I asked that question is that I've tripped over that particular problem, more than once, in context to BugCrowd and in context of just doing my own research on the side. But I don't think I've met anyone who hasn't been accidentally alarmed by a build they've gotten from a cloud provider at some point. So it's sort of like for the newies amongst us, how to think ahead on that one.
Yeah. I think that's also, we're not enterprise like in an enterprise, that stuff's planned for, what you're doing from the outset. Bounty, it's like, woo, VPS, go. And then you realize the impact. But, yeah.
I just wanted to touch on this thing because Arkwhite or Andy just recently just put this in the Discord, and he said, I'll read it directly. I want to poke that question answer around bounty earnings and automation and being able to turn them off. I think there's an element of economic privilege there that we need to acknowledge, where someone who's short on resources and just starting out can't have that power. And I totally agree. When I started Bug Bounties, I was not saving any money, and I didn't spend any money on Bug Bounties. So the only money that I've ever spent on Bug Bounties has been money that I have earned from Bug Bounties. So initially, my automation was running on my home internet with on my laptop, and I just had to like leave it on and change my power settings to like stay on overnight. And then, you know, I got a few bounties and I kind of reinvested that into, you know, DigitalOcean and everything. And then as you kind of start being more successful, finding more bugs, you can keep reinvesting. I kind of treat automation like an investment, right? And the day that my automation stops earning as much as I'm paying for it, I would downscale that automation or just stop it entirely. And I totally acknowledge that, you know, economic privilege is definitely a thing. So I don't mean to come across that way, but yeah.
It's worth calling out that DigitalOcean has the $100 voucher for your first month, I think. I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's definitely a free proof point there to start out as well. You can Google that and find affiliate codes everywhere. Essentially, they'll give you a month's worth of credit. You can go nuts on that and use that as your earning point if you're starting to build out. So
yeah, and Andrew Mohawk on Discord just pointed out too that AWS has a free tier. So you can definitely make it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Azure and GCP, I think, as well.
I think they've all got some sort of entry level tier that most people can get a bit of a basic start on. Just don't go crazy on some of those, because then you will end up with a bill pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So obviously your talk touched on automation, and you need to know some sort of coding skill to start that. What sort of things should people look at starting with? Would you think Bash is good enough, or maybe go for Python, or what's your thoughts around that?
Bash is like super powerful for doing hacky things like that. That's basically how I kind of look at Bash. But if you want to build something that's more scalable, and you want to build something that's going to kind of how do I put it? I don't know, be more stand the test of time and more resilient. That's the word I was looking for. You want something more resilient and more scalable, you're probably going to want to look at something else other than Bash. Bash makes it really hard to interact with databases and things like that. And personally, I put time into learning a framework, and it's a web frame. Oh, it's Django, right? So it's a Python web framework. And the reason that I kind of learned that is because it's got a great ORM, which is the way that the framework interacts with the database.
Yeah.
So I was able to do that. Also, it's in Python, and I knew like a bit of Python already. And like that's the way that I did it. But I didn't want to say that in the talk, because there are just like a billion different ways to do automation, and every single person that has automation is going to do it differently. You know, doing it in Django and Python had some serious disadvantages, but it had a lot of advantages too. And I think no matter what way you do it, it's going to have disadvantages. Like, for example, Donut the other day, you probably saw his tweet. He put up a tweet that said, I actually regret writing all my stuff in Rust because no one ever collaborates, because no one knows Rust. And I'm like, that's a good point. Like, Rust is amazing and it's super fast, and like the guy's really switched on and can code anything in Rust, but he'll never get he'll never get a huge amount of collaborative support from the community, because it's not a language that's used very much. So you might want to look at stuff like that too, support and everything. But I think I know where you're going with this, Vortex, and that is like the classic, do I need to code to do bug bounties, and what language should I learn?
Essentially that was the root of the question.
Yeah. So do you need to code? No. And you know, the question, do I need to be able to code to do bug bounties, is a binary answer, and you only need one person who can do bug bounties without coding, and then the answer is no. So you don't need to, because there are some top hackers who at least say that they can't code. But is it going to help you? Hell yeah, it's going to help you. You know, every time you find a 0 day, or you find some type of bug. If you can't code and you don't have your automation set up or whatever, then you're going to find it once. If you find a bug and it's in some software like a WordPress plugin or whatever, and you find that bug, you can now test that out on all of your hosts very easily by writing a script, right? And if you've already got your automation set up, you can probably get that scanning in like an hour or two. So I think, that's how I use my coding skill, and I think it's super beneficial, super helpful, but it's not a prerequisite to being able to do bug bounties. It's just, for me, it's been very helpful. So, yeah.
I completely agree. So we know Codingo's recently, well, not so recently, but it's got the tool called Interlace, which is a really great tool for scaling out sideways where you might have a single script, but you can scale it out with that and run it a lot faster.
Yeah, so that I guess if you don't know how to code, but you know what tools you want to use, the goal of that is that you can build run files. So you can say run nmap, then run this, and build out a target list. So Sajib Lahani and I did that when we were pen testers, because as a pen tester, you land on a network, you'll write a script, you want to run it everywhere. But same applies for the bounty space. You just in a more external facing capacity. So
much more scale needed too.
Yeah. So basically what I use Interlace for is like if I want to quickly do something at scale and I just put together like a crappy script that just like checks one host, I don't want to have to spend hours and hours like refining my script to take in multiple hosts and do multi-threading and work over CIDR ranges and things like that. So basically what Interlace allows me to do is write a crappy script to do a POC, and then Interlace allows me to scale quickly. And you can do that if you don't have like a proper like a full-on automation system set up. You can just use Interlace, and it will probably do the same thing. You know what I mean? So it's super powerful for that kind of thing.
But I guess automation, we've kind of covered the mindset where you begin and in terms of language stack and things like that. But bounties in general, you start today. What's your first action? What's the first thing you would do? You sign up and you want to start. And beyond the just start, what's the first thing that you're doing?
So education is number one. The resources I mentioned in the talk. So Jason Haddock's stuff, anything from Jason Haddock's. Following lots of people on Twitter, getting involved in the community. Pentester Lab, Web Application Hackers Handbook. They're like the few ones that I recommend constantly. I feel like if you start with those, then after that, you'll be able to find your own resources and you'll know the difference between a good one and a bad one. So that's like fundamentals for me. But yeah, if you're coming from a space where you already know how to hack, the next thing would be educating yourself on how bug bounties work. So, no matter which platform you're hacking on, there'll be documentation on like how many points you get for what you can expect to be paid out on the bounty profiles, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what kind of vulnerabilities we accept and what kind of vulnerabilities we don't accept. So that's the side of education as well. So the point I'm trying to make is even if you're a pen tester and you start doing bug bounties, you still got some education to do, although nowhere near as much. And then once you're educated, I'd be focusing on bug bounties, on automation. And also I would be, but not just automation. Like I said in the talk, I'd be focusing half my time on automation, half my time on manual hacking. The ideas that you get from manual hacking, you can apply to automation. And the ideas that you might get while you're coding on automation, you can also apply to manual hacking. So I think it's important to have both. I know I pushed the automation thing a lot in my talk in terms of like generating passive income, but you really do need to do both, I think. And those big bucks, those big bounty payouts usually don't come from automation, right? So for automation, you tend to be scanning for things that are lower risk, and there tend to be a lot of people scanning for them. So it just depends. But I do want to make another point there too, and that is that when we're scanning for stuff using automation, it's easy to just be like, I want to find vulnerabilities and I send this probe and I receive this. And is it a vulnerability? Yes or no? Like we're looking for binary stuff. But I think, I think a trend that's happening at the moment is that people are realizing that a lot of stuff can't be automated, but there are ways to hint at things that might be vulnerable that you can scan for in an automated way. So for example, one thing that I've done in the past is pulled CVE results from Shodan, right? And each CVE has a CVSS score, and if you just add those CVSS scores up, you can get a like a decent idea of how vulnerable that machine might be or how old it is because it's running old versions of Apache or whatever. So you can kind of prioritize which host to hack on in that way. So automation is not just about flat out finding vulnerabilities. It's also about being able to prioritize the host that you do your manual hacking with, and it's about being able to find hints at vulnerabilities. So I don't know how to put it more succinctly than that, but there are not a whole lot of vulnerabilities that you can just scan for and get definite results for. So sometimes you need to be looking for hints and prioritizing targets to manually hack on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. That is, I didn't think to put that trick out. I'm kind of sad it's out now, but that is one of the key tricks that Luke and I used for identifying where to look. And the other thing, since we've given that up, I'm going to tip that. The best part of Luke's talk, I think, there was it's not just about monitoring vulnerabilities, it's about monitoring points of change. We put a lot of time into working out how do you identify that an asset has changed so you can look again, because a lot of people do state in time recon. They pick up a mass, they pick up Subfinder, they run all of their recon, and then they come back to it later. And a mass, with Jeff Foley today, they've just added change tracking. That's really key, but doing it at a finer level than just new domains appearing and disappearing allows you to go test an asset that's changed. And that, such an underrated piece of your talk that I really wanted to kind of put a bit of a bold around, because I think it's really key to finding things that others are missing. Because if you're continuously monitoring it and others aren't, and they come along and they just start monitoring it, they're not going to look in the same place you are. Yeah.
And here's something, here's a tip. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I've just haven't gotten around to it. So now someone's going to beat me to it. But anyway, that's okay. So one of the things that I recommend doing is endpoints on targets, right? So if you've got automation set up that crawls the target and finds endpoints. So for example, if you've got hack crawler running on all of your different subdomains, or it's some other crawler, whatever, you'll get a bunch of endpoints back. And when those endpoints change, it's a good time to look at that target and have a look at the new endpoints, right? Because if you're finding new endpoints, then that's new functionality that you can explore. And not many people are monitoring endpoints at the moment. So that means that you're going to be one of the few people that's going to see that change. And you're going to be probably the only person that actually checks it out, right? Even though there are loads of bug bounty hunters. These are the kind of niches that you've got to be looking for when you're bug bounty hunting, right? And then another thing that Hackcrawler does is it dumps JavaScript files. Now, if you can get the URLs of all JavaScript files that are in use for a particular application, and then you can constantly monitor those JavaScript files for just changes, like particularly like if that JavaScript file changes size, then you're basically getting back like functionality change in that application. And JavaScript files are such a treasure trove of like money, basically. They're a treasure trove of information about that application that you can use to exploit it. So if you're one of the first people to see that JavaScript file after it changes, there's a good chance that if there's a vulnerability there, you're going to be the first one to report it. So it's little niches like that. Like that's just one example. And I'm fine about giving this stuff away because there are just like a billion other niches that you can target and then that you can look at, and that's never going to stop. There's always going to be more things to look at and more things that people aren't doing. Even if they've thought of it, like implementing it is a whole other thing, right? So yeah, I find that the times that I've made money, like just trying to kind of generalize the whole process and the times that I've been successful, it's been when I've found a niche. and I've found this like one thing that I'm the only one that's doing that. So I'm the first one that sees it. I'm the first one that's able to like check it out. And that's not necessarily like a type of vulnerability or a 0-day or whatever. It's like finding a particular way to look at hosts or a particular way to scan hosts that nobody else is doing. So this is like when people say like you know, the hacker mentality, or they say the hacker mindset, things like that. This is what they're referring to. You're finding little different ways of doing things that people haven't thought of, and you're looking at like abusing functionality in ways that other people wouldn't have thought to do or whatever. And yeah, anyway, that's kind of something that I wanted to get across.
No, that's really powerful and super underrated too, because I think there's hunters that go wide. Like almost every hunter starts going wide across stuff and just looking everywhere for things, because part of what they're doing is learning in the process as well. But then as they do that, there's like the particular techniques that allow depth that plug into their skill set or their interest. And that's this continuously iterative thing, because, you know, eventually you get bored of a particular technique or a particular kill chain or whatever else, or you get new input from going wide. In such a way that it makes you, you know, kind of diversify your skill set at that point in time. Like that whole kind of relationship between this very broad, like, I just want to hoover up information and learn stuff. And then, you know, as we go along, it connects into this new part of interest that I can then engage and be effective with. That's a really important aspect of personal growth that I think doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's also, we're early in the phase of recon. We're still at the point where everyone talks about it as if recon, fine, stop. Like we look at GitHub, right? Everyone's searching for credentials on GitHub, when one of the key things you can be doing is actually looking for endpoints that no one else is touching. And those credentials, most of the time, lack an impact and don't end up being a valid finding. But if you find endpoints, you can go and find things that others have never actually tested on. And it's funny to me, particularly jumping into triage, seeing all of these people doing a lot of work in GitHub, and they're going, oh, I found these credentials. They either have tested and found they're not valid, or they haven't tested and they're not valid, but not actually going to the point of looking for domains, new assets, or how does that, you know, credential that I found tie into a bit broader impact. And that's where the real money is. That's where the most successful people are putting their effort, is to use recon as a tool, a wide coverage tool, but then to go really deep on what they're finding.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like this concept, I think, applies. I mean, I'm sure CJE, you could probably attest to this more than I could, but I think it works in business too. Like you hear about the niche. Everybody's got to find the niche. Like when you're talking about, like, you know, drop shipping bros, or like you know, finding the next cryptocurrency or whatever that's going to boom. I think like this is what everyone's trying to do. Everyone's trying to find that little thing that no one else has thought of yet. And bug bounties are no different. It's really interesting, because bug bounties, you're working across a huge range of targets. The people working on it are from all different cultures, all different backgrounds, all different educations. They've had different mentors. Some people are coming at it from binary or mobile or web or whatever. And like, you've still got to find something that's unique. It's like hard, but that's in my opinion, that's where like bug bounties, that's where you become successful bounties, being creative.
And I completely agree. Like I draw, so when I talk to entrepreneurs a lot as a founder, I draw parallels between offensive security and building a business all the time, because it's like fundamentally the same thing. You start from point A, you want to get to point B. You've got, you know, a limited set of tools available at your disposal and a whole bunch of stuff trying to stop you. And your job is to create a path, which is no different to hacking a system at the end of the day, in terms of, you know, what your brain's doing to kind of execute all that. Obviously what you're playing with and all those different things, and like there's a lot of difference to it, but like the fundamentals, I think are very much the same. So I think it's a very transferable skill set, really, when you think about it, when you can get into this idea of like, okay, I'm going to, you know, be like relentlessly focused on the path, but approach it as continuous learning. I think the other bit that's you know, important and just kind of logical to call out is that, like, for someone who's building a system, they're not thinking about XSS or injection or whatever else. They're thinking about making the system works with whatever has gone into that. Like you think about a connected car now, you've got QNX running on an ARM chip talking out the tire through a radio sensor to a thing that you've just driven past that's got an API with a mobile app, blah, 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 blah. There's all this convergent attack surface that goes into these systems. And that's ultimately what we're here to try to find vulnerabilities in so they can be de-risked. So there's this incredible breadth of stuff that you can end up focusing in on. The only way you can pursue new things is if you got at least some sort of eye on how broad that spectrum actually is. So it's good. Depth and breadth, I think, is the two have a really tight relationship, and I think being able to navigate, being able to improve both at the same time, if you can pull that off, then you're winning.
I just want to give an example. I want to give an example of that from my music days. So using that hacker mindset, basically when streaming came out, when streaming became a thing, when Spotify became a thing, a lot of musicians were super angry because you get paid like 0.02% cents per stream or like some ridiculously tiny amount of money. And musicians were used to only earning money from CD sales at the time, right? Which is like, you get at least like $15-20 for selling an album. So a lot of people were super angry about that. So there were the people that got angry about it and are still angry about it and still post about it on Facebook all the time, because a lot of my friends are musicians. I still see a lot of it. And then there are the people who were like, okay, the game's changed. It's a new opportunity for me to figure out the system and figure out how it works, okay? And I saw two great hacks, you could call them hacks for this. One band was like, we need to raise money for a tour. So what we're going to do is release an album. It had like 10 tracks on it, and the tracks went for 3 minutes each. And they were just dead silent, no music at all. And they called the album Sleepify. And they were like, hey, if you want us to come on tour, everyone's got to play this album while they sleep on repeat. So they made a stack of money because they got so many streams because everyone was just playing this album on repeat, even though there was no sound at all. So they made a stack of royalties off that, and then they used that to go on tour. And then the other way that I saw, this guy who was like an average musician just bought a baby name book and was like, all right, I'm going to record happy birthday in every single name. So it'd be like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Clarissa, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Daniel, happy birthday to you, like whatever it was. And he just released that for every single name. And the guy's a millionaire now, right? Just from recording birthday.
To tie that back, did he automate that?
I don't know.
Happy birthday to
you. Yes, even though, I'll keep the ethical argument of streaming out of it and out of this conversation entirely. But but the game changed, right? The game changed, and some people whinged about it and failed, and then some people saw the new system as an opportunity to grow and they smashed it. So like it's the same thing with bug bounties. You've got to treat it like a game, and you've got to be like, how can I best, even though it's very high competition, how can I still find bugs? And like that's how to do it. You need to be creative.
So one thing that was probably important to mention with regards to success is success in bug bounties is not necessarily about the amount of submissions you make or the money you earn. It's about impact. So impact to the customers. You might find an RCE or something on a free program. That's good impact.
Totally.
There's been examples of that. Some of the recent 0 days that have been out there have actually been reported through our platform before they were even released.
Many times. Yeah.
Sometimes
months before, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But there's a key thing here.
They're almost never. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
There's a key thing here. One thing that's a bit of a people make this mistake. There's bug bounty tips as a tweet has become a way of people promoting themselves, and it's less about good bugs these days. So let's say DMARC, for example. If you're reporting DMARC on a non-email based domain, the company doesn't use it, what's the impact to them? What is a hacker going to do?
It's not O-Day. Stop
it's
it.
not O'Day, and like they just it's one of those things where it's like that statement that I mentioned earlier. As an attacker, I can. It's as an attacker, I can send email on a domain the company's never sent email from before, and it's got a subdomain in front of it, and it's got no value, right? The customer's just not going to resonate with that, and versus looking for things that have customer impact.
That's it. Don't report DMARC. It's a dupe.
It's probably a dupe. That's our next T-shirt.
I think the lesson is, if you really are concerned and you don't want to dupe and you really want to do things, go to Pentester Lab, sign up, do the Essentials badge, learn how to go deep, and then use your newly acquired recon skills from like this talk and Bug Bounty Hunters methodology to find somewhere to go deep. Don't use it to find something to run over, those categories that won't impact or have some sort of tieback. Use it to look for XSS or to look for CSRF in an app that maybe no one's touched before.
There you go. All right. Well, look, I think we're button up on time here. So thank you so much, Luke. That was baller. And I mean, Michael mentioned it in the intro. It's something that I've really enjoyed about having you in the scene, but having you as part of Bug Crowd as well. Is just the way that you unpack the mentality and really focus on that, but then connect that to the technology as well. So it's not just all about the psychology. It's not just all about the tooling. It's about how those things plug together. That was a fantastic talk. I think a lot of people are going to get value out of it for a long time. So appreciate it.
I hope so. That's the dream.
Awesome.